Community Insight. I am your host, Reverend Dr. Rodney Coles. We want to welcome you to this broadcast. We have two special. We have our representative from District 8 is here. We also have another young lady here, Ms. Green. Ms. Green is with us, and so we'll be talking about some issues that we want to bring to our community. And I am going to start first with our representative, District, Mrs. Kandie Smith. Greetings. I don't know what time is coming on. Greetings. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me here.
All right. Now, we know that you are a mover and a shaker, and we truly thank God for you. And I can imagine you wear some Nikes. You must have got some kind of connection with Just Do It.
Well, I do move and shake as much as I can because that means I'm living. But basically just try to make sure that I'm out and about, helping citizens with issues, concerns, informing people, educating people. So thank you so much for inviting us on your show, because we know it's about education. And there's so many things that's happening, that's coming up. We want people to not miss it. We don't want people to say, I wish I would have known. So I'm excited to help come talk about the census and voting and the importance of those things, and always trying to be an available representative for serving District 8.
We appreciate you. You've always been there, and you're all over the place.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I am.
We appreciate that. I know it's not easy. We also have Ms. Green, Ms. Gwen Green. Welcome to the broadcast.
Well, thank you, Pastor Coles. It's as Kandie has said, we thank you for having us on your program this morning. We welcome the opportunity to bring some of the issues that we feel are most pressing at this moment to the attention of our community. And so, again, thank you for having us.
Well, again, you're more than welcome. I'm going to start with you since I have you towards the end. Is explain to us what we want to share with the community.
Okay. Well, Kandie and I are here this morning representing Delta Sigma Theta Sorority, the Greenville Alumni Chapter. Ironically enough, we are just back from Delta Days in the nation's capital, where we met with some 1,500 other Deltas with the idea that we were going to come together as an organization, talk about the things that are most pressing in our African American community, come out with an agenda, and then take it to the Hill to talk to our senators and our Congress representatives to let them know of our concerns and how the people that they are supposed to represent and how they're feeling about what's going on. As you well know, Delta is an organization that's really about advocating for those who do not have a voice or feel they don't have a voice. And so, ironically enough, our theme is power in our voice. And so that's what we are trying to get our community members to understand. There is power in our voice. And for this particular moment, we want to talk about voting and how critical that is for this community and really for all communities. As we all know, this country is at a very critical point in its history. Some have said this is the worst of times. There are some others that probably rank a little higher, but this is a bad time for our country. And all of it really stems from the activity or the inactivity that's going on in Washington, D.C. And we can change all of that, not only for what's happening in Washington, but also what's happening here locally. As we all know, all politics is local, and it really matters what we are doing on the local level. And so that's part of why we are here. Although we did take an agenda with us to the Hill yesterday, around things like voting, around things like the census. We were also talking about fair pay for women. We were talking about the need for things like the Crown Act. I mean, in this day and age in 2020, why are we still talking about our hair and why we need to have legislation that prevents discrimination against not only young people, but all of us on the basis of our natural hair. So those are the kind of things that we're here to do today. And most importantly, it's really to help our community understand that they do count, they do matter, and we exercise that right every time we go to the polls.
Wow. And that is so true. We need, when you mention about legislation, we need legislation just well as we need education. We need them
Yes.
both to help us to move forward. And I would like to bring our representative, District 8, Ms. Kandie Smith, on that to speak a little bit about the voting. What is your thoughts on the voting? Because I do know we thank you and Senator Don Davis on fighting for things out there, because legislation is so important for folks, and it's important for them to vote. What is your words to the community and what we really need them to come out and vote?
Well, the thing is that people, whoever decides I don't want to vote, they're still voting for the other person, in a sense. It's important for people to know that their voice matters. And this is their opportunity to cast their vote. Now, when we say all politics are local, that's one thing that's big for me. You know, I started here on the Greenville City Council, serving District 1 for a number of years, and also serving as the mayor of Greenville. The decisions that we were making on that city council affected people locally. So if you had a pothole, if you had anything with the fire department, police department, anything that was happening locally, zoning, that's what we were in control of as a council. We made laws on. So when people say, "What, my vote doesn't matter," well, if you're concerned about when this is going to happen or that's going to happen, and it's right here in your city, your vote does matter. What we do is we look at the top of the ticket, and when we see the top of the ticket, we're so far away from it. We look at just the president's race. We're like, well, we don't really matter. What they do is whatever. We have to make sure we're always voting down that ballot. And a lot of times we don't do that because we know the big name that's been on TV, commercials all the time. But when we look down that ballot, we don't necessarily pay attention to our mayor, our city council members, our judges, because they affect us, our sheriff race, the DA race. I mean, it's just so many different things that we need to make sure that we're paying attention to. So we have to make sure that we have a conscious effort to educate, because people don't think about that. They just think about what they cannot reach, and they forget about what reaches them. And I could not be in position if people did not vote for me. And I just always say, may the work I've done speak for me, because when people know they can have access, and a lot of times when you're voting for people you can have access to. If you can't talk to the person that represents you, that's an issue. Because I found it troubling when we went on the Hill yesterday. There were representatives who represent me that we did not have access to.
Wow.
They're not always willing to meet. Sometimes they're in committees, and I understand that. But when you're calling to schedule ahead of time, like I did, and according to what's on your agenda, they're not willing to meet, that is an issue. I could only imagine if I took that stance and said, if you agree with everything I say, I can meet with you, but if you don't and you have a difference of opinion or ideology, then I can't meet with you, then that's a problem. Because as an elected official, my job is to represent everybody within the district. It doesn't make a difference of their social economic class. It doesn't make a difference of their race, ethnicity, their religion. It doesn't make a difference of their class of politics. My job is to meet with everyone. But that's how you gain as much information as possible in order to make votes that represent the well-being of the constituency that you serve. So I just encourage people to make sure they're coming to the table and understanding their children can vote. So I have a history and a record of taking children who turn 18 to vote. So I got a call right before we left for D.C., and one of the grandparents said, "I hope you're coming to take my granddaughter to vote. This is her first time." I said, "Yes, ma'am," as soon as I come back from D.C. So today, that's what I'll be doing, is taking her to vote for her first time, making sure she understands the process and what she's doing, and they're proud of it. We just got to continue to educate everybody. And we have, I think it said it was like 400,000 minority voters or minority constituents in the state of North Carolina that's not even registered to vote. That's over 400,000. That's a lot.
It's a lot of people.
It's a lot of people. But those same people want to be represented and should be represented. That's why their voices need to be heard.
Well, I'm gonna say this. A lot of things you do behind the scenes still helps. There's some people that get in the office, they just forget where they came from, but you haven't. You always still involved, and I won't talk about the dancing you do. You know, to do dancing and stuff for cities. Very involved, and that's a personal touch for the community. I always say a personal touch is always better than preaching word. And when people can show that personal touch, and I'm gonna come to Ms. Green with this real quick, regarding of education, do you feel that sometimes the people not being educated about what's happening in the community and voting? Because it may be even, I know democracies, they have a guide that's out there and it lists all the people who was voting, and I'm not being discriminating, because there's some people just can't afford all that advertising. That's so much fundings, and it's to help us educate us, because not everybody could, but the hardest is really to do the right thing, and because this person could afford all that, that's not fair for a person who can't afford, So I'm just going to bring that back towards you real quick. Well, what is your thoughts of us being educated a lot with that? And
well,
your opinion, of course. I won't start anything.
Part of what we've tried to do, Pastor Coles, is we've really tried to bring the candidates, if you will, to the people. And we've done that by conducting candidates forums. Excuse me. And we've actually had some very interesting times. Not only did we do a candidates forum, but also, and I forget the name of the group, but it was another group that also did a candidates forum where they brought out really the local people who were coming out, who were actually involved in this primary that's going on right now. That, on March 3rd, everybody needs to have their vote in. As we were speaking earlier, we encourage the African American community, because there is such great fear about going to vote. We encourage them to come out during early voting, so that if there's any problem, we can get it resolved then, and they can still be able to vote. We don't want folks to get to March 3rd, find out there's a problem. Has your name been purged from the rolls? We don't know. Are you in the right place to vote on that particular day? We don't know. But if you go out now for early voting, you can virtually vote any of the open places without having to go to that designated specified place. As to whether it is fair, I think we're always going to have that problem in terms of who has more money than the other and who can raise money. And that's why I believe it's so important that when there are candidates forums being conducted, that the community come out and hear who's speaking for them, who's speaking against them, and who would best represent their interests. Certainly we have to avoid, if you will, selecting someone on the basis of one issue, because it's going to be more than one issue that they're going to be challenged with as they sit in that seat as a representative. But try to get a feel for how would this person vote or represent me in this particular instance. I think that's part of the educating, and that is to keep coming out and asking those questions and to know who's on the ballot. Because I think that's one thing that's of concern when we have so many races that are going on. I mean, when we posted the primary ballot, I mean, I believe it lists how many candidates for the president, because that's on the ballot also. For folks to help select who's going to move from primary stage to, if you will, being the candidate going into November. So I think for all of us, it's about when the opportunity presents itself. Because when we go to these forums, you do, as an audience participant, you do have an opportunity to ask questions, to find out where they stand on particular issues, or, if you will, to present them with a what if kind of scenario, because that too gives you some idea of how that person would think and how they would react in a given situation. And that's really all that we can do at this point, because we unfortunately don't have money for everybody to fund their campaign so they would have equal opportunity. But we do, as an organization, when we conduct our candidates forums along with the other fraternities and sororities, we do invite all the candidates to participate. And some are more readily willing to come and share than others. And that's the other thing that, as a constituent, someone who's looking for someone to represent me, I have to be concerned if you don't have time to come and talk to me in an open forum where I can ask you a question prior to going into that voting poll. So
I would share that with you. If a person couldn't come to speak to me now, then that means you couldn't speak to me later. People tell you who they are immediately.
Yes.
So that's a key point. We have in the forum, and we are answers and questions that we need to know and what you stand for. We may see what you put on TV or on a piece of paper, but the questions you would know by me asking. If you can't show up, that means a whole lot
says
to
a
me.
great deal. Says
Yes,
a great
it
deal
does.
about your availability to me as a voter. Because certainly before you get my vote, if you're not willing to spend time with me, you probably are not going to want to spend time with me after the vote. And that's the thing that I think everyone should consider. At least that's the way that I develop who am I going to vote for. Is this person going to be accessible to me when I show up with my issue, with my problem? And I think that's one of the things that my good friend here sitting next to me, she's made herself available and accessible even to people who aren't necessarily in her district. She's open to the people.
And I would vote for that because I would say even where and on Martin Luther King Day, we had our event and she was at the food bank and she said, Pastor Coles, I'm not going to be there at 12:30, but I'm going to get there.
I will be there.
I'm
yes.
going to get there. And I said, well, we hold you a spot when she show up because it's really true when people show up and you can call them and they're there and they help you. To me, that means more than words can really express that you care. They don't care your position. They care, do you care for me enough to take your time to come? So I'm saying that because I have seen her and she's in one place, I'm in another place because her heart is like my heart. We care.
Yes.
We're not just telling you we care. We're there.
What's that old adage? People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I think that's something that all of us can make sure that we take to heart. Even when we're out in the community and we're trying to get people to register to vote, when we have individuals say, well, I don't vote, we have to be very careful how we respond to them.
That's right.
Because if we begin to respond to them in a hostile and negative way, that turns them away. Our job is to educate. So we have to use apathy when we're talking to them. And sometimes you have to try to walk in that other person's shoes. And it might be what they don't know, or maybe some things that you can share that allows them to see a different perspective. But when we come at them and we're coming, angry and upset, and, you have the right and I don't know why you're not voting, then that turns them away. And then they tell the next person and the next person. And so when they know how much you care, then that attracts a different type of curiosity. Because I've had individuals in the community, because everyone knows that when it's voting time, I go out, I knock on doors, I even transport people to the polls, and especially during early voting because they can still register and vote. And I've met individuals who told me I don't vote, and then we start a conversation. I said, well, if you don't vote, that decreases my opportunity or chance to get into the office and represent you. Oh, so you run it? And they look at me like I've not been able to just sit down and talk to a person in a position that you're in before. I was like, but you should be able to, because our job is to represent you. Anyone who's elected in any position should be able to have communication with their constituents. If they can't do it in person, they have phone, they have email, they have this social media stuff that everybody's using now. They have a way to connect with their constituents. Newsletters, they just have ways. And if you don't utilize those ways, if you're not trying to reach the people, but you're just using your name to get in position, in my opinion, then you're only working for yourself. So I will stand by. People will do not care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I've assisted a lot of people to register and vote because they knew I cared. And I know there's other elected officials out here who care. And I encourage and challenge all of them. Reach out to your electorate. Talk to them. Seeing something on television, hearing something on the radio is completely different than me running to you in Food Lion and having a conversation. And those are the things that I do. I go pick up my daily breakfast of a banana and I speak to the people behind the deli and we have a conversation. Let me talk to you, Miss Kandie. Let me ask you this. Let me tell you what's going on. So we walk and talk. And those are the things that I think that people should do.
Yeah, we
I can
need
be
that.
anywhere. That's what you want people to be able to do. And then I know you mentioned my dancing. I have some skills, so I like to dance with them too, especially with the kids, because if you can connect, that's part of the game. If you can't connect, why would I want to vote for you or elect you if you can't connect with me at all? That means you're not going to be, I feel like you may not be open to hear my ideas and views, especially if they're different from yours. So I listen to different views and opinions because that helps me. I can't just say, oh, I got to go only on one side or the other. I have to listen to everybody. And being on the city council taught me a pothole is a pothole. Doesn't have a D or an R. It's a pothole.
That's what it is.
So you got to make sure you're representing the people, and that's key. That's important. So that's why we gotta keep educating people. We gotta keep showing as much love as possible to people. That helps everybody because the more they learn, the more they do, and it takes some people some time, but we can walk them along the way.
It's amazing when you say what you said. If you don't want to hurt people by telling why don't you vote, you can really hurt them, and so you understand why they not where they at. It's the same as telling somebody, well, about church. People don't need to hear your religious. They don't need to hear you giving, you know, the Bible says in Scripture this here, but I don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear that.
Right.
Just talk to me, you know, and we can talk, and it's that communication is so important.
Right.
And there's a lot of people feel, well, I'm not going to vote. I heard that many a times, and it does take time just to hear them out. And we do appreciate what you do because we need people like you and those in the city councilors, those in higher position. Back to that personal touch, even pastors, we have those conversations. Personal touch. For a lack of time, I want us to speak a little bit about the U.S. Senate, how important that is for the community, because we had about 4 minutes.
Oh.
So time flies. We have fun, ain't it, Sandra?
Yes, it is when we start talking. Well, the subject of Census 2020, we really, we're trying to, as an organization, we are part of the Complete Count Committee for Pitt County, and as our responsibility and what we are really wanting to do is to get the word out to the Black community that it's important that we get counted. You do count, and it's so critical. As we talk about what is the census? The census, what it does is it's something that's mandated by Constitution that every 10 years that there will be a census taken, and that is a count of everyone that is within the borders of the United States. So when people are completing their census form, it's so critical that they count everybody in their house. We're not asking you to know their names or anything like that. We want to know who's in the house. As we talk about it, the census really, it's about two things that are very critically important, especially when you consider that the county that we sit in is one of the poorest of the 100 counties in the state of North Carolina. What the census does is it, first of all, let's talk about money. There are over $700 million that will be distributed based on the census count. Those will come out in the form of things like Medicaid, Medicare. It'll be your SNAP program. It will be your community development block grants. Those are the kind of things and it'll be your roads. It'll be your bridges. All of that money will be going out to the states and then funneled out to the cities. And it all has to do with how many people live in Greenville, how many people live in Pitt County, and that's what it's going to do. It'll determine whether you have a pre-K for your children to attend. So that's why it's so critically important that we do that, and that is to count the people in our home. The other part of it is, in North Carolina, it's about, and what we're known for right now is the whole issue of redistricting. And when the census comes out, the states have the opportunity to redraw their districts based on the census. And those are the reasons why we need to make sure that we get counted, so that if there's to be a redrawing, that all of those numbers are considered, so that the representation is maintained and that we don't lose and go backwards in this thing. And certainly as I've keep telling people, it's you get impacted by the public funding that's coming back down into the state that's then apportioned out to the cities. Kandie, do you have anything to add?
Wow.
No, the only thing that I encourage people to do is to understand that nobody is going to come looking for you. Nobody can come report you saying you're illegal, immigrant, anything of that nature. Just make sure that you complete the census. That's the only thing I ask people to do.
And Pastor Coles, one of the things is that this year it's a little different in that you can do it electronically. I'm so sorry. And certainly by mail. And we're going to work with organizations here in Greenville to see if we can't do something around that.
Well, for the lack of time, y'all was a great guest. This is for the community. You have heard information about the U.S. Senate. You heard that we need to get out there and to vote. We need your help to help us in our community, not just talk about issues in our community. Get out there and vote. Do your U.S. Senate so we can have the information to help our community. We thank you for listening to our broadcast. God bless. See you at the next broadcast.